to Module 7, our last module in the course. In this module, we'll be focusing on monetization avenues, consideration, strategies. Now, with respect to monetization in general, we will be looking at how it is that we actually want to start implementing strategies. We discussed before the types of strategies that we should be considering when we actually are creating our patent application. We'll go a little bit more into some of the details relating to how do you actually apply some of those strategies when you're creating an application, because if we look for key things that go into an application, we can look for those key things after a patent application is filed for purposes of determining the value of the patent application itself. So we'll be diving a little bit more into some of the details relating to that. We'll be looking at valuation of patents. How do you actually put a monetary value associated with them? We'll look at the monetization avenues, whether that's litigation, licensing, etc. And then we'll also be considering the future of patents. So with that said, we have implementing strategies part 1. I'm in the textbook right now on page 291. And this relates to segments 7.1 and 7.2. Now, first off, 7.1 and 7.2 are relating to implementing strategies, which is, I would also note, a little bit different than what expressly you are reading in the textbook. The textbook here is all about Rule 11 charts. Now, I put that specific reading in here because when we get to 7.3 and 7.4, where we talk about valuation, that is dependent upon having a solid understanding of strategies, which is what the oral lecture will relate to, as well as having a solid basis for Rule 11 charts. So Rule 11 charts, even though I'm not lecturing on it immediately right now, know that it is absolutely fundamental to understanding how it is that we value things, and it's the way by which we actually show that. Now, there are a few questions that I have here. First is, why is it important to make sure that you do not search for applicability of products prior to the priority date of the patent? So let's assume that we have a patent that, that is granted, or at least has a priority date of January 1st, year 2000. And it's granted at some time thereafter, and you have this patent, and you're trying to ask the question, what's the applicability of this patent with respect to the market? So you start looking, and you're doing some searches on Google, and you find a number of products that are potentially using the protected protection associated with the patent. And the question is, do you and can you look for products that actually come prior to the priority date of your patent application? And the answer is no. Because if you go ahead and, let's say, are searching for products back in your 1998 or 1999, that's prior art. And if you have now shown that the infringement of the patent is occurring by something that occurred prior to the priority date of the application, in short, you have invalidated your patent. Not something that you want to do. So if you actually are mapping it to something that predates the priority date of the application, that is almost an admission that your patent is not novel or obvious, or non-obvious. And so when you do these types of searches, obviously the presumption is that it has gone through a rigorous novelty type consideration, non-obvious consideration, but nonetheless, to just be doubly sure, when you go ahead and search, often what you'll do is you'll put a date restriction. If you put in, usually I put in about 1 year after the priority date of the patent application. So with respect to my example, if the priority date was January 1st, year 2000, I would put the applicable date as January 1st, 2001. So it gives me a 1 year buffer zone that allows me to gauge. And let's assume that I just get everything underneath the sun that actually appears if I do a hard restriction date of year 2001. What I may then start doing is actually advancing that date forward. Year 2002, year 2003, year 2004. And what you start seeing is as you apply these date restrictions, is there will be 1 year where suddenly it will all drop off. Meaning that, and I'm sorry, if, when I talked about the date restrictions, I was talking about first about how you do not want to search prior to that priority date, and so you put that buffer zone of 1 year, so year January 1st, 2001. If you're trying to determine when it is that a product was introduced, you would modify, in fact, the end date, not the beginning date, because that beginning date of January 1st, 2001, we want to keep there because we don't want to go prior to that time. Again, there's a 1 year buffer zone that we put there. But it's the end date that we can start, in fact, trailing back. So if we go from year 2019 to 18, 17, 16, all the way down, there'll be a year where suddenly the products will suddenly decrease. If you are doing this date decrease and you get year to 2002 and there's still just as much present as year 2019, then that's an indication to you that this product has been around for a significantly long time. And if there's no real decrease in when it is that the product, at least offerings relating to the product, are being made public, that's an indication to you, you probably do not want to search on that product any further, because there is some potential it may invalidate your patent. Okay, so as far as what goes generally on the left-hand side of a Rule 11 chart, on the left-hand side includes all of the elements associated with the actual claim. So you have your claim on the left-hand side, all the limitations relating to what actually is required. On the right-hand side is where you're showing the applicability of the claim. So you have the product literature, information relating to that technology on the right-hand side that shows how it is that the claim is being mapped to the specific feature of the product or the technology. We will discuss Rule 11 charts more fully in subsequent lectures, but just want you to be aware, Rule 11 charts are actually very, very important. That it is the basis for when you file a patent litigation suit. You have to have Rule 11 charts that are completed. It's the basis often for even licensing or even brokerage type avenues. Again, both of those avenues we will discuss further. But it is the way by which you show the applicability of the patent to the market. The more applicability, namely the more charts you have to known infringement in the marketplace, the more you can actually show the value of the patents. As far as the slides are concerned, let's take a quick look as far as how does we implement strategies. So going back to one of our prior lectures of the castle type analogy, where we have offensive, defensive type strategies that can be applied, market protection, and the very first one that we discussed, core technology, the crown jewels of what it is that we're trying to protect. That's all within the context of this castle of all the different things that we should be thinking about when we're actually putting together our patent application. All of these uses of the patent, offensive, defensive type use, market type, occupation, etc. The use of the patent is dependent upon whether or not we have built the patent in a way where it can be used in that manner. So when we talk about implementing strategies now, there are just a few things I want you to keep in mind that we can look at as far as building this patent application that allows us to look for value. The first key determination when you are looking at building value here is whether or not the patent application was drafted in a way that is simple and easy to understand. So some patent applications are so complex that even technical experts have a hard time sometimes reading them. And not only that, but if it requires a technical expert to read it, how many technical experts are actually on a jury panel? And the answer is usually none. It's usually common everyday people that are on the jury that are expected to now read the patent application. And so the more complex you make the patent, the more complex you actually piece it all together, the harder it is for the jury to understand. So when you describe things, there are some that say the greatest genius is one who could take a very complex subject or thought or idea and express it in a way that even a child can understand. And that should be kind of a basis of our reasoning when we are looking at evaluating patents. The question that we're asking is obviously how complex is the subject matter, but how clearly is it actually written? Is it written in a manner that people can actually understand it, or is it just so complex and written in a convoluted way that makes it hard to understand? And we have discussed implementing versus using as well. So the application, some other things that you can look at, claims. You can look at what type of claim sets are actually implemented. Is it a method claim? Is it a system claim? Is it a computer product type claim? And all these types of claims allow infringement from different angles. So a method claim would be looking at a method of using the patented invention. So if we have, for example, let's say we have a pair of scissors, you may the process may be, the invention may be a new way of actually making the scissors. So you might have a hydraulic press that comes down with metal molds that actually extrude the metal out, and then it actually cures it and then finishes it. And so you may have a very complex system comprised of specific parts, and it's the system as a whole that you may be claiming. But you may also be saying, well, in addition to just using this system with all these specific parts, we also want to just have a method of making scissors using elements A, B, and C. And so what we have here is a method using, in addition to an actual system that is making. And so when you look at different types of claims, claiming will protect the invention from a different angle. And you want to make sure that these different angles are adequately actually included as well. Claiming is a little bit of the three bears type scenario. You don't want it too broad, and you don't want it too narrow. Too broad would open the door to potential invalidation. Too narrow would restrict infringement so much that infringement may not be occurring. So you want a claim that is broad enough that it has applicability to the market, but narrow enough that it will avoid any prior art type issues. I indicate as well you want alternative designs where within the claim set you can have many dependent claims that look at and consider alternative uses or designs of the invention itself. Clear language with good support in the specification. So if you use a term in the claims, one of the things you can do is search for that term within the specification. If the term is clearly defined, if the term has clear examples, that would be what it is that you would be looking for. A potential red flag would be, let's say, a term that would be not your normal term in the claims, but that term is not even defined in your specification. So the more ambiguity between how it is something is claimed and what is actually covered in the specification, the more ambiguity there, the higher the risk, the lower the value. Specification, you want it to be very broad and deep. That actually looks at explaining in a very detailed manner how it is that the claims would actually be implemented. And so with respect to that, you want, again, a lot of clear examples and embodiments to show how it is that this invention will actually be used potentially in the future. So claims, specification are two things that when you evaluate patents, you're looking at. Now, obviously, when you are creating the patent, you are keeping this all in mind as well, but that goes back to, again, implementing versus using. The last point here is to keep your patent alive so that the claims can be amended. We discussed that previously with respect to our lectures, but just when you're going in and evaluating a portfolio, it's one of the key metrics you look at. Is there a pending counterpart in this portfolio that you're looking at? As far as specification, you look at what specifically has been invented. And what I mean by that is you might have a core technology type invention that you are considering, but you also want to see, is there a robust specification for other ways in which one may build on this core technology. So yes, you have a core technology, but if you only have your core technology covered in the specification, meaning a very narrow construction of the invention itself, that may not allow you a lot of basis to actually expand and show how it is that this core technology relates to other things, or how it is that this fence around the core technology may be expanded to include other types of inventions as well. I indicate there that with respect to the example of a pencil, do you have a wood writing device with graphite? And that's, for example, one example as far as how it is that one may claim a pencil type apparatus, where you simply have a writing utensil that includes graphite as the form of writing within the wood. And what happens if you use lead instead of graphite, or ink instead of lead or graphite? Again, there are a variety of different ways in which the pencil construction may actually be modified in some manner. So if we only did a core technology, we may start with this wood writing device with graphite, but the question is, does the specification specifically indicate, well, you may use lead instead, or you may use ink instead, if there was some type of a chamber by which the ink may be contained within it. And so the more that you think outside of the box, the more of a greater fence line is potentially constructed around your invention. That is what you're looking for in the specification. How robust are the examples? Are you limited to just one narrow construction, namely a graphite type construction? Or is the specification robust enough where it looks like at 10 different examples, and each of these examples may be a different type avenue that could be pursued in a continuation?